All right, this is another really, I think, very important story, actually, about what is going on in the North Carolina Senate race. So there's a Green Party candidate. I can't remember if you and I interviewed him, but we interviewed Matthew Ho on Krystal, Kyle, and Friends. He had a great perspective as a veteran of the Afghanistan war on the deep levels of corruption and how the words from the leaders didn't even come close to matching the reality on the ground of what was happening there. So Matthew decides he wants to run for Senate as a Green Party candidate. And he did everything right. You know, they had the infrastructure in place, gathers all of the signatures and more by thousands that they need to ultimately get on the ballot. So a couple things happened here, just blatant dirty tricks from the Democratic Party, which pretends to care so much about democracy and we have to save democracy, et cetera, to get him kicked off the ballot. And so far it has worked. So the very first thing they did is they started, go ahead and put Matthew's tweet up on the screen here. He says, in recordings and eyewitness accounts provided the Green Party and the media, Democratic Party operatives falsely claimed, so they lied, to be representing the Green Party and even the Board of Elections as they bombarded our petition signers with deceptive claims. So what happened here is once they file all of their petition signatures, then the Democratic Party goes and grabs them, and probably what they did is they matched them to their own voter file information. And then they go through systematically and call and text all of these people to say, hey, do you want to remove your signature? Because, you know, this is really going to hurt the Democratic Party and we have to make sure that we stop the Republicans. So do you want to remove your signature? Now, this behavior is, I think, obnoxious. I think it's anti-democratic. It's something they did in Montana, too, and they were successful at it, actually. But it's not illegal. But where they ultimately really crossed the line is they got caught because they called, I think, the head of the Green Party in the state.
Yes.
They got caught lying and saying, we're with the Green Party and we really are representing them and we really have their best interest at heart. Don't you want to take your signature off the ballot? So they actually impersonated Green Party volunteers to try to get this done. Ultimately, they weren't very successful. They got a couple hundred people to, you know, be bullied and persuaded into removing their signatures from the petitions. So Green Party still had way more signatures than they needed to get on the ballot. So put this next piece up on the screen. So what happens? Well, it comes down to almost the date when, you know, sort of by statute, you have to have the ballots locked into place and who's going to be on the ballots locked into place. And the Green Party needed 13,865 signatures. They initially submitted 22,500, way more than needed. Ultimately, almost 16,000 were officially verified by the County Board of Elections. But even though they had more than 2,000 verified signatures, more than was needed, on the State Board of Elections, which has 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans, all 3 of the Democrats voted in lockstep to deny the Green Party candidate ballot access. Did they offer any signs that there was like a reason that they did this? No. They said, oh, there might be fraud. They didn't prove any fraud. They didn't show any, they didn't come close to showing thousands of signatures that were a problem. No, they said there could be possibly fraud that we haven't uncovered, that we have no evidence for. So we're all going to vote in a lockstep partisan faction to kick the Green Party off the ballot.
That's crazy.
Totally crazy, totally anti-small d Democratic. Just outright saying, we don't want this candidate on the ballot, and so we're going to, in a lockstep partisan fashion, kick them off with no real justification. Now, my understanding is that there are, you know, potential legal recourses from here because typically, what makes sense is the assumption is that the signatures are valid. And then you have to prove if there's fraud, like we saw in Michigan, they proved that some certain percentage were fraudulent. And so people got kicked off the ballot justifiably. Here, they did not prove it. They came in with an assumption that these signatures are invalid, even though that is not the case. They never proved that it was the case. And when the lawyer for the Green Party tried to speak up and say, hey, you know, you can't do this, they actually muted him and wouldn't hear any more from him.
That's, I mean,
it's insane.
Whenever you pointed this out and I was reading about the so-called fraud, this really is like an actual stop the steal phenomena. And because it's in North Carolina, it's being completely, I mean, first of all, the media is not covering it.
Yeah.
Even though it's a totally nuts story. But what are they so afraid of? That's what I don't understand. First of all, look, you're in North Carolina. You're already fighting an uphill battle, okay? But second, it's like, it's not like this is gonna be such a competitive race. And then if you really wanna beat him, then just beat him. I don't see why that they're so concerned and fighting so hard, tooth and nail, in order to keep this guy off the ballot, to the point of impersonating people, calling signatories and more. It's completely, you know, it really is dystopian almost in the way they're trying to keep it and rig the system here. I also think that it's crazy that they were able to rig the vote certification against him because the Democrats ran the election board.
Right.
And that way and it's a lockstep machine all the way up to the top.
I mean, it does show you that as hard as it is, like as hard as they will rig the internal Democratic primaries, it is even harder to get through as a third-party candidate. Because, I mean, this State Board of Elections, it shows you how the whole system is designed for there just to be two parties that have a lock on the whole process. So when the 3 Democrats who control the board got together and said, we don't really care whether the signatures are valid or not, we're gonna block them, that was the final say. So it is out and out rigging. It is out and out fraud, you know, impersonating Green Party volunteers, insinuating there's fraud, but not proving it. It is really an insane story. And it just shows you how, you know, they're pearl clutching about democracy, which is something I really actually care about. Like, I would like to see the country be much more small d democratic. It's another example of how they're just full of it. Because when it came down to it and they had their own ability to rig the system, they'll do it. It reminds me of, remember the Iowa caucuses when they wanted to like throw out the vote or do a different calculation for the caucuses that were coming in so strongly for Bernie Sanders, these like overwhelming like immigrant communities that were showing up and voting overwhelmingly for Bernie. They're like, we want to count those ones differently. Again, total hypocrites out blatantly rigging the ballot in North Carolina because they're too afraid to actually appeal to voters and win in fair and square.
It fits with the rigging that you were talking about with Joe Biden too, in the broader Democratic primary. So this goes all the way up to the top, and it really is baked into them. I don't know what they're so afraid of. You know, you can just beat people if you want to, but
then
that seems too difficult.
Really actually appeal to people.
Okay.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.